Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB, aka Danielle Bezalel. Let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Sex Ed with DB. Today, we talk all about queer inclusive sex ed and how that should be the norm in all sex ed we teach. We start with two-time guest and one of my favorites, Andy Duran. Andy is a Bay Area native sexual health educator and the education director for Good Vibrations. As a trainer for over 15 years, this California bear cub and proud blue-collar dandy loves providing accurate and accessible sex information with the hopes to arouse curiosity and spread truth. We then have the incredibly bright and lovely Fatmata Bah. Fatmata is a peer health educator at The Door, a center of alternatives. In a space dedicated to approaching youth development in a holistic sense, they relish in the chance to broaden young people's ideas around sexuality. Let's get it going with Andy.
Thank you again so much. As I mentioned to you before, we're so excited to have you. We love you. You're a celeb of the podcast. We think you're amazing. And we would love for you to just kind of start out by saying your name, a little bit about your background and your job title and what you do.
Yeah, no worries. So I am Andy Duran, also known as Educator Andy. I'm from Oakland, California, and I am the Education Director for Good Vibrations Babeland.
Amazing. And what did your sex ed look like as a young person? And specifically, what, if anything, did it include about sexual orientation and gender identity?
Ooh, well,
big cues.
Yeah. Let's see. Sex ed for me did not include very much about queer identities, about sexual orientation, about gender at all. I think my sex ed, I'm going to be honest, growing up in the Bay Area, it was still pretty advanced than what I hear and what I see other states and other countries especially discussing. But even with that, it wasn't as queer inclusive as we would like. It definitely had elements of STI awareness and pregnancy prevention only, and so no information about anatomy, pleasure, physiology, relationships, anything that would be a positive.
Right.
Actually, everything was kind of how to not do something, how to not catch something, how to not get pregnant, and so there really wasn't any information about, hey, these are different identities, these are some ways people express that, the kind of cool introduction to sexuality and sexual health and wellness as a whole, wasn't there.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that is pretty common for most people. And I guess I just wonder, what do you wish that you had learned about sexual orientation and gender identity as a young person going through school?
Well, I think that, often people talk about, should sex ed be taught in schools? I absolutely believe that it should, but I don't think that's the only place that it should be talked about. But I think it's something that is a great opportunity that we have as we're teaching people about important things that they're going through, to also be inclusive about the experience, physically, emotionally, as well, and to prepare them for a lot of the actions that they're going to be engaging in, or a lot of the conversations that they might be hearing, to make sure that they know that they have a safe space to ask more info if they have questions. So the first thing is making sure that people feel like they trust you to ask questions, if people think that you're going to provide them with, bad information or no information, or judge them for the questions, then you already have a bad kind of foot to start on for this pretty vulnerable and personal conversation.
Right.
So that's the first thing, and then other than that, age appropriate sex ed is available in all the different kind of age groups, or grades that are out there. And so, conversations on consent, conversations on boundaries, body autonomy, body image, and kind of some basics. It's okay if you have a discharge. That doesn't mean you have an STI. That's common. Or more information. One of the things I hear a lot is a lot of people get segregated into kind of boys-only classrooms, girls-only classrooms, which first of all is super inappropriate because those aren't the only identities. But also then they only learn the information as it pertains to their identity or their body. And so we have a huge amount of men in the world that know nothing about female anatomy, that know nothing about menstruation, they know nothing about any of this, and then ultimately become lawmakers, and and so I think that we're doing a huge disservice by splitting up who gets to learn what, and by not providing the facts and making it mandatory for everybody to know, to ensure that they have the best kind of opportunity to explore themselves.
Totally. Yeah. Wow. What you just said about lawmakers, I'm just like, oh shit, you're totally right. Like, these people know pretty much nothing about female anatomy, like you said, because the only way would be for them to seek that information out. And I feel like that is very rare for people in power to seek that information out.
And I think that at a certain age, people think that they have all the information they need and they stop seeking out anything else.
Totally. And in terms of specifically sexual orientation and gender identity, what do you think that looks like in queer inclusive sex ed? How is it evolving in terms of teaching young people and adults about different types of gender identities and sexual orientation? And what does that look like to you?
So when I was in high school, we had a speaker come to our class and talk to us about the local LGBT center, and that to kind of do some anti-homophobia kind of information, and we got to meet and talk to this. Actually, it was a couple of queer people. It was a panel of queer folks, and that was this really amazing experience for me. Not only as a young person that was questioning my own identity and exploring my own sexuality, but also for the folks around me to know that if I came out later in the year, they already had a little bit of education around, queer identities, around trans identities. And so I could kind of refer back to that and expect or hope that my experience would be received well. And so I remember that being a really just kind of validating opportunity for me to just feel like, okay, they're listening to this person, they're asking good questions, it's not me on the spot. And now I feel safer kind of trusting the people I'm sitting next to every day, 5 days a week for several years. And a little freer to maybe let them see those sides of me. So again, just awareness and visibility is a huge impact. And going into more specifics, I think if you're going to talk about anything, where it's anatomy or sex ed in classrooms, making sure that it's not just heterosexually focused. Talking about pregnancy prevention is primarily, talking about the penis goes here, and then the sperm comes out this way, and then this is how babies are made, and this is why you don't want to do this. And it's very reproductive oriented only. There is because they're avoiding the conversation of pleasure, then they completely avoid the conversation of queer identities, because there's no, in their mind, view of a reproductive, kind of concern. But queer people can still get pregnant. There's lots of different kinds of couplings that people can make as queer people. And two, that's not the only thing that people are doing when they're having sex. So can we talk about, all of the other concerns that are beyond just penis and vagina play?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. And so in terms of like the actual sex act, that's a really good way of being like, well, yeah, there's not only one way for people to have sex. And how about in terms of gender identity? What are some like ways that you recommend like folks talk to their kids or young people or other people about different kinds of gender identities that exist?
So there's a really great book that we carry that I adore, and it's called Red. It's a crayon's journey, I believe, something like that. And it's a story. It's a kid's book. It's illustrated magnificently, and it's about a red crayon it's about a crayon that has a red label.
Oh, okay.
But is only able to draw blue, and all about how every time somebody is trying to, use it to draw red, it's not performing well, it's not doing it, and how it wants people to understand that, that's just not, that I'm blue inside, that's what I do, and maybe it's just labeled wrong. And it's so beautiful and so easy to understand, and it's so simplistic that, this is something that you could give a young person. Let's say you have a trans kid coming out in your life, and you know that they have siblings around that are confused by that, and they're like, I don't know what to call my sibling now, or what to do. This is an excellent way to kind of explain, this is how they feel inside, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, got it. Now, if this book was just on a bookshelf in a classroom for elementary school students to look at or discuss, that would be just this immediate way that people can kind of understand it, so that later in life, as they start to kind of interact with more people and ultimately, explore their own theory of gender, but also meet people that are expressing gender differently than they may see normally in their life, they can go, okay, like the book, like the crayon, got it. And it makes a lot of sense. And so, we see a lot of this happening right now on things like Sesame Street, with the adding of characters that are autistic or that are adopted or that are immigrants, and really kind of showing this representational kind of concept of, these are people in your school too, these are people in your community too, and they have stories as well. And I think that we could do that easily with showing trans folks, whether it be trans young people, or having just awareness and celebration of trans celebrities, or having books like this that just explain the process so that people understand. It's just a basic kind of understanding that people are different, and let's learn about those differences.
Oh, I love that so much. That just warms my heart. Because every bookshelf should have books like that talk about different kinds of identities. And, just like you said, like, it can, of course, be appropriate for kids, especially when they're connecting the dots about, a crayon and a label compared to a person, when it totally does make sense to youth in that way, which is wonderful. Switching gears a bit about STIs. So I think, just a bit. I think that there's a really common misconception that certain people aren't at risk for STIs because of who they have sex with. So, for example, like people with vulvas who have sex with other people with vulvas. Can you talk about this kind of like vital information for queer youth in terms of, and just people, queer adults, in terms of safe sex and who can and cannot spread STIs and STDs?
Absolutely. So I think that first of all, there's a lot of confusion about the various STDs and STIs that are out there, and how they're contracted. So a lot of people will assume, okay, these are fluid passing STIs only, or this is something that would only happen if it's coming from sperm or semen, and not necessarily the awareness of skin-to-skin contact spreading of STIs, or STIs that are spread orally, or other things that aren't just solely based on penis and vagina intercourse. But this is a great example of when sex ed only talks about penis and vagina intercourse, then that's the only time you're learning about STIs. So you're not learning about them from blowjobs, you're not learning about them from cunnilingus, you're not learning about them from anal, because you're not talking about any of those sex acts in class.
Right.
And so all of the focus is, I only can catch something if I'm having that type of sex. And that is a huge disservice to our community, and especially to not only queer folks, but people that are having other types of sex other than just penis and vagina sex, and are not.
Which a lot of people are having.
Absolutely. So, concerns, that I often hear, people are not aware of using dental dams. I know that's one of the things that, people listening to the podcast now are probably like, but dental dams are really fun and really sexy. I'm just going to put that out there, that if you're having sex with somebody, you should be pretty enthusiastic about the act that you're doing, and there's really not a lot that can interrupt or mess that up, including a very thin layer, of latex between you.
Right.
But, if someone is concerned about spreading, let's say, oral or skin-to-skin contact STIs, let's say herpes, let's say HPV, if we're talking about, things like crabs or other things that are just maybe less talked about, maybe people have a better awareness of kind of some of the concerns that are there. I also think that people are very focused on signs and symptoms of STIs. Like, I would see something, I would know. This is such a misnomer. You often do not know if you have an STI. That's why checking, being tested is so important. I was lucky that my high school had a health center that did STI checks and testing.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Super amazing. But I know that's not the case everywhere, especially places that are abstinence only. In their conversations, they're certainly not going to support you in getting tested. But the reality is that, STIs are not something to be afraid of. They're just something to be mindful and aware of. And in the same ways that we, protect ourselves when we go out to try not to catch colds. Oh, okay, I'm going to take an emergency. I'm going to, but also if I catch one, I'm not going to be too hard on myself, because that's life, and I did want to go outside and engage with people. STIs are the same way. We should feel comfortable in engaging with other people, and also knowing what the risks are in those particular acts, and then making those decisions on, okay, I'm comfortable with this risk because it's low risk, or, I'm comfortable, but you're not. Okay, so we're going to use this dental dam, or we're going to put on some gloves, or what have you, and just kind of having those conversations. So one of the things that people often don't take into account is that STIs can be spread from more than just penis and vagina sex. STIs can be spread orally, through fingers, through toys, and so we always want to know as much information as we can about what STIs can be spread and how, so that way we can minimize that transmission, and also just ensure that we are playing safe and having a lot of fun. There's a kind of a joke that, if people want to have sex like a porn star, that they need to get tested regularly and share those results and communicate with their partners. And it's entirely true. But that's one of the reasons why people in the porn industry are often have lower risk of STIs than folks that are not, are because they are having those conversations and getting tested. So people think the sheer number of people that they have as partners would increase that. But honestly, what you can do at home already is just go get tested and communicate, and you're doing a huge service to yourself in preventing the spread of STDs and STIs.
Transitioning a little bit into talking about kind of like non-binary identities and pronouns. So I think a lot of people, and pronouns in general, even with people who don't identify as non-binary, but I think that a lot of people don't really understand the importance of pronouns for some folks and really struggle specifically with using correct they, them pronouns. I think they have trouble because they, just forget, or they don't spend enough time and effort to practice. And I was just wondering if you could talk about pronouns in general and why they matter, as well as why they specifically matter for folks who identify as they, them.
Absolutely. So pronouns are super important. It's how we communicate with each other and how we refer to each other. And when we are not respecting the pronouns that somebody is asking us to refer to them as, we're already kind of letting them know that, one, we don't see you this way, and two, we don't really care to try to see you this way. And so that doesn't mean that mistakes don't happen. Of course, mistakes happen.
Right.
People accidentally use the old pronouns, especially in that learning stage. I mean, my mom will accidentally call me every single one of her other kids' names before she remembers who I am.
That happens.
Yeah. So that's also, kind of human. But when we're not trying, or when we're avoiding it altogether, we're saying so much to that person about how we don't really see all of them, and that is huge. That's so painful. I actually just did a workshop this weekend for young queer and trans youth, and a separate workshop later for their parents. And it was really amazing to see this group of supportive parents, piling into a room to ask questions on like how they can better support their children in their trans identity. They're like, I don't know any of this stuff. They know more than me. They're looking online. I thought I needed to do my homework too. What can you tell me? That's the difference. It's like knowing that if they accidentally slipped up once, I'm sure their kid would be, feel the pain from that, but also know, oh, you know what, Dad's trying. Like he's been really good. He went to that conference. He's been like my ally, in all these ways. And so in a lot of ways, practice makes progress. I'm not a perfectionist, so I always say progress. And really, the more that we can do to practice that, whether it's, the coworker that is using they, them pronouns, or our own children, or our partners, or anything, these people are everywhere. It's important to prepare for that and to acknowledge that this is something we didn't learn as folks in school. We didn't learn about alternative gender identities beyond just cis male and cis female. We didn't learn about pronouns for non-binary folks. We didn't have that. That doesn't mean these people weren't there. They were there in this time, all along, feeling the pain of being called the wrong pronoun, or not knowing how to find identity and community with others because there wasn't this name for it. But now that we have it, all they're saying is, hey, can you actually use this because it feels so much better for me? And we should all go, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, we got you. And do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, I love that. Practice makes progress. I think that's so beautiful and such a great phrase, because I think it does take folks a little while, but the fact that, those parents went to that conference and are actively trying, means a lot, I'm sure, to those kids.
Absolutely. And with they, them pronouns, I often hear but it's not grammatically correct or, things like that. And I mean, honestly, if you are standing beyond or behind grammar as your defense for hurting someone's feelings and disrespecting them, like that, that's the larger message right there that we should be talking about. Not the, but it's technically okay, or, in some cases we do use that they, them pronouns if we're talking about, just stop the argument, stop the conversation. You're talking about hurting someone. Like, why? Why are you defending it? For me, they, them pronouns have been really easy to use for other people. Let me clarify. Not very easy, but easier than some of the newer language that's been created, like Z or here, which, is an entirely new vocabulary to take in, whereas they and them, as a queer person, I often use they, them pronouns when I didn't want to tell people that I was dating someone, at the time of the same gender. So, if I had a girlfriend, I'm a trans man, and so at the time, if I were identifying as lesbian and I had a girlfriend, I didn't tell my parents, I'm hanging out with so-and-so and she and I are doing this. I would say, I'm going out to meet up with a friend and they're going to pick me up and we're going to go do this and then I'm going to go to their house. I was very...
very vague.
Very vague, exactly. So in a lot of ways, that holds this kind of sweet queer history spot for me that I kind of still enjoy, keeping they and them in the lexicon. But yeah, no, I definitely think that it's ultimately about practicing and about showing that you care. And it's not just about doing it when they're around. It's about doing it always, because this is how that person identifies. It's not just them being sensitive and saying, please use this around me. It's this is me, and when you are referring to me, refer to me in such a way. And I think that's so important.
Absolutely. Can you talk a bit about the concepts of gender fluidity and non-binary identities and how it feels like younger generations, like Gen Z, we're hearing, like all in these articles, like Gen Z, they're all gender fluid and non-binary, which obviously isn't true. Not everyone identifies in that way in Gen Z, but I do think we're seeing more of those identities and more outward identities of non-binary and gender fluid nowadays. Like that in terms of folks who are out and folks who are like able to be who they really are in that way. And can you just kind of talk about those identities and why you think, the younger generation is kind of taking hold of that a bit more?
Absolutely. So, I mean, with any generation or any kind of time period, the youth are going to bring it forward. They're going to say, you know what? We looked at this and we think we can do better. And I love that. I absolutely love that. Even as somebody who's aging and, in my mid-30s, and I feel sometimes like, hey, wait, that wasn't the way we did it. Like, I have to take a step back and go, and maybe they need something different right now than I did. And so, so when I see the younger generation, when I saw this room full of young trans kids yesterday and this weekend, and they were just so like powerful and so proud and so strong in their identities, like it gave me so much hope for the future and so much pride in kind of even the tiniest role I could have played in making it safe enough in my generation for students now to do this. And so as a young queer activist, and trans, GSA president and all of these things, I remember being the lone wolf in my school on that topic. And now people are really seeing themselves, and they have something, they have the internet, they have social media, they have the opportunity to see themselves all over the country and the world. And I just think that's so beautiful. And like I said, with they, them pronouns, it's not new. It's that we're creating a space where people can stop hiding. And that is the most important thing to recognize, is that we aren't, we're not trying to, it's not a new concept. no one's like, oh, you know what, like 2019, like let's come up with some new genders just for shits and giggles.
Right.
It's not a new concept. It's always been the case. Many cultures have always seen this, and people are just going, enough is enough. Like we see each other now and know we have the numbers, and we know that we hear each other's stories, and we are demanding that we are represented and respected finally. And I feel like those parents in the room, they didn't cause their kids to be trans by talking about trans identities with their children. They didn't create a generation of trans kids. They are supporting and protecting their trans kids. They are learning about how to raise trans children, and they are finally kind of in a place where there's this awareness and there's this support within each other. Even the parents had each other to kind of fall back on and go, yeah, like buying Packers is hard, right? Like, and it's great because even still now, but 10, 20 years ago, I was the lone wolf, but there were also lone parents out there that didn't know what to do or how to deal with it, and probably didn't handle situations in ways that really supported those lone wolves. So now, really, all we've done is we've created a community, but the people have already existed.
So powerful. Just going to let that sit for a hot sec. So the next question that we have is about asexual and aromantic identities. And I feel like these identities can often be forgotten or erased for lack of talking about them, especially, obviously, we were talking about queer sex ed, and there are very few things overall that get taught, depending on where you are, obviously, in the country, regarding queer sex ed, but specifically asexual and aromantic identities are really not given space. And I'm really glad to have one of my best friends who kind of recommended that we talk about this. And I just kind of want to know if you can kind of give some definitions to asexual and aromantic identities and kind of talk about maybe some of the experiences that those folks may be encountering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as we're talking about people like learning new terms and kind of the practice makes progress, it is important to expand and look at our communities, to look at our flags, to look at everything and go, are we leaving some people out? And ACE folks have been left out in a lot of ways, from the conversation, from the movement, from the dialogue, definitely from the media, and so it's definitely one of those things where I'm really actually glad that you're bringing it up too, because it could be an episode on its own, and definitely should be, since I don't identify as aromantic or asexual. So it would be great to get somebody who does. But as a sex educator, we talk about this all the time because, one, folks that are asexual or aromantic still are our customers and still might have various relationships to masturbation or to relationships with other people. So in the case of maybe being asexual, there are plenty of people that might still have a relationship with another person that might not involve sex or that might involve masturbation but not sex with their partner, or might involve no masturbation. There's so many different ways that one can identify with this that it's important for our staff and for our stores to all have that awareness as well, but also because as a movement, sex positivity often leaves out folks that are ace. This idea that in order to be sex positive means that you have to actually do all the things, which is not true at all. Somebody can be, a virgin and still be incredibly sex positive, and somebody can be asexual and still be incredibly sex positive. Like, those things aren't hand in hand. Somebody can be going through a period of not being sexually active by choice or by disability or what have you, and still be an incredibly sex positive person. And it's one of those things that if we put all the focus on sexual activity in order to talk about sexuality, we're ignoring and kind of basically just ignoring a huge community of people that are affected by this. And one more example of people finding each other and going, oh, I'm not the only one. My family thinks it's weird that I'm not dating, or I really like this person, but I want to be with them, but I don't want to have sex with them. Does that mean that there's something wrong with me? Or I don't like men, I don't like women, I don't know
right.
what, and it's often these kind of questions, or the pressure of society, to find a date for prom, or to eventually end up in a relationship that looks like it's long term, or to have children, or any of these things that people are like, it's just not for me. And I think that the more that we break this archetype that we've been kind of, given, this cookie cutter lifestyle, the more that we start to see how expansive and diverse sexuality, sexual orientation, gender expression, gender identity all are, the better we will all be by learning those differences and not being so, confined to what we've been given before.
Did you know that 1 out of every 3 women-identifying individuals have reported having painful sex within the last 90 days? There are so many reasons why people can experience this type of pain, and there's an incredible tool out there that can help. Meet Millie. Millie is a vaginal dilator for people with vaginas who have painful intercourse. Millie's single insertion, 1 millimeter at a time expansion puts the user in control. It can relieve physical pain from conditions like vaginismus, endometriosis, fibroids, cysts, IBS, surgery, chemotherapy, and emotional pain like anxiety, depression, and stress. Learn more about why so many women are choosing Millie at www.milliemedical.com. Fatmata, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me, Danielle.
I'm so happy you're in my apartment. We're going to chat about queer sex ed today.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great combo.
I am glad that this conversation I always have it, and so now it's cool to have it actually feel like it's not just in the confines of the coffee shop or my bedroom.
Sure. It's going out to the public.
I know.
Into the podcast sphere. Sweet. Let's start with you saying your name and sharing a little bit about your story, like where you grew up, who you are, how do you introduce yourself to new peeps?
I feel like I'm always adjusting how I do it every time, but
yeah.
My name is Fatmata Bah. I am from a it's kind of a large city in Maryland, PG County. And I am the only child of a West African mother and father. And growing up, I was a very quiet, aloof kid. Still have those tendencies, but now being in New York, I've realized I really like talking to people.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. So
they're everywhere, and so the talkativeness that I didn't have as a child, I now do because there's so many people to talk to and say the things I've had in my mind for so long.
Yeah.
And so in being a peer health educator, it's just perfect because I'm paid to talk. One of my favorite things. But yeah, talking about myself is always so hard because I'm like, what else about me?
Yeah.
But if you don't find me at work, you can find me at McNally Jackson or Housing Works or the library.
Love to read. You're a reader.
Yeah, I really do. And sometimes it's just being in that calm space where, everyone's kind of like, they have to like be quiet.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the one rule. It's just shut up.
Exactly. And so I don't have to do the work and be that like obnoxious person shushing folks.
Oh, for sure.
So, either the library or museums. That's like
good one.
the Leslie Lohman Museum of Lesbian and Gay
I haven't
Art.
been there.
Right, like 4 minutes from work. So immediately after, sometimes I'm just like
check it out.
Just checking it out. Such a lovely space. Museums. Tea. I like tea.
Good. Yeah.
Tea. Medicinal properties there. Caffeine from something other than coffee, which makes my stomach hurt.
I also, I don't really drink coffee, and occasionally I'll get like an iced coffee with almond milk and sugar and just like feel like a queen that day. And then I'll go crazy. Like let my eyes get are darting, and I'm just kind of like jittery, and I'm like, this is not good. Why do I keep doing this to myself?
Imagine the folks that are like daily caffeine.
I don't get it.
Consumers.
My partner drinks like 2 to 3 cups of coffee every day, black, nothing in it. And I'm like, that's insane to me.
That's hardcore.
Yeah. But people do it. They really do.
Yeah.
Moving right along. So we want to know, how do you identify in however many identities you want to share? And when did you realize that you identified in that way?
Right. Okay. So I guess first things first is like I'm always surprising myself with new things I learn, because I feel like I'm coming to understand identity is very fluid and it evolves. And so the person I was at like 12 is not the person I am now at 22. But I essentially identify as a queer, non-binary femme. And for me, what that means is, in terms of queer, more so in terms of attraction. So for me, kind of my spiel is like, as long as someone respects me and we're capable of like building a healthy dynamic, then I'm always open to exploring a romantic relationship. And non-binary, that's something I'm coming into now. It's weird because growing up, my mom, she thought I was a lesbian. It was unconfirmed, but she had her suspicions. She did not have evidence that was, the evidence you look for.
Sure.
It was more so, you wear your pants on your hips.
Ooh.
Real women
That's a
wear their
classic
pants.
lesbian.
I didn't know
no,
that.
I'm just kidding. I don't know. No, it's silly. It's funny.
And so, like, I was just not fitting these, like, indicators of what a proper young lady fits into. And so she was always like, you're just too much of a tomboy. And for me, I was like, I guess I'm just here. I'm really just here. And so for me, I feel feminine, but I don't necessarily feel that I am a woman. And that is something that I don't know how to break down for folks yet. And I think I'm still understanding for myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I need labels sometimes to help me make sense of what it is or who it is that I am.
Right.
But then other times I'm like, maybe I don't want to pigeonhole myself or like have to use like an indicator.
Yeah.
When we still have time to understand and come into ourselves. But
right.
For now, just your friendly neighborhood, non-binary, black, queer femme.
That's a great quote. And sometimes it just really depends on the day, right? Like it just, however you're feeling, especially if like, for me, it's like if people are coming in my face with, nope, not that kind of coming. But anyway, if people are like coming at me is what I meant to say. Good thing this is a sex ed podcast.
Stand-up. This is
you
gold.
like it?
I love it.
I got to tell everyone I know that you said that, because that's literally what I dream about all the time, but I would be terrified. Anyway, when people are like being aggressive towards me, say, and are like, no, things are this way. I have very much inside of me to be like, no, that's not exactly what you think it is, and break things down and be like, you're putting people in a box or whatever, like what have you. I think it depends on the day for me to try to like, in terms of being an ally for like queer folks and like wanting to make sure that people are kind of put in their place with what they don't know and understand. Right. And also at the same time recognizing that like, since I'm not experiencing those things, it's kind of like a middle person of being like, no, you don't really know what you're talking about. Let me, if someone's willing to share their story with you, like connect you.
Yeah. Or even like pointing people like, here's an Instagram. Yeah. Here's this that you can look at. Because I think another reason I'm so hesitant with like labeling myself, or I'm scared of those labels, is because I think we all have this idea of what a lesbian is or what queer is, right? Right. In terms of look and behavior. But everybody's not the same. It's kind of hard because I think a lot of times I have to tell people like behavior does not equal identity. So like you can't always like pinpoint like, okay, she's definitely gay because X, Y, and Z, or he does this, so he might be that way. And so I think a lot of times when I express my identity, folks are like trying to see all the ways that I tick certain boxes. Totally. Which is not helpful or accurate. And for me, then it makes me feel like, am I not X, Y, and Z enough? Am I not queer enough? Am I not femme enough? And all these different things. And I totally understand you. Like, it is not always like someone's job to break down information when we're in the digital age and so much is accessible.
Just Google it.
Really.
And sometimes though they don't necessarily find the right things to Google, which is why we need to get accurate information, true stories from people who are willing and able to share them. All the things.
All the things.
Okay, sweet. So what are you passionate about? And what do you think you want to do as a job or a career, like long term?
I feel like there's always so much pressure to have it figured out by like graduation of high school. Right. And for me, it's like evolved and shifted like 3 different times, but within kind of the same realm of work. But I've decided for sure, I want to be an educator. Yeah. Right? That is solidified. Everything else might move around, but for me, I really have grown to come to love the work that I do in talking to high schoolers about safer sex and healthy relationships and all these different aspects of sexuality. Because I didn't have that growing up. Like the talk my mom gave me was kind of like, don't let anyone touch you there. And that was it. So now I kind of associate my genitals as being like a thing that are bad and they should not be touched, right? And then in school, the conversation never was about sex and pleasure, but more so about, this is your internal anatomy. That's all I can remember. Nothing else is memorable, and that's a problem. And so for me, if I were an educator, I think I'd really want to discuss like the depths of sexuality and like the things that like you struggle with and you Google in your bedroom because like you don't really have an outlet or community at the moment to talk about these things with and like air out these ideas. And I also really love like learning about culture, like cultural anthropology and sociology, looking at like levels of economic status. And it's like all these things that I feel like I'm like, wow, I would have loved to learn this in school. I wish this was like an elective, right? Because these are all things that affect me. As it
should be, right?
And I would love to create a space where young people are welcomed and encouraged to explore like different concepts that affect them or like that they feel are applicable, right? We don't talk about when it comes to wellness. In my experience going to school, we didn't really talk about mental health, right? We talk about physical health, and that's kind of the end of it.
Jumping jacks.
Kickball. And health was taught in middle school by our gym teacher.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Like most people who learn health learn from their physical education teacher, which does not make sense because people who study phys ed do not study sex ed, and they're completely different skills.
Yeah. And so then there's stuff that you end up missing along the way and learn later in life, maybe through the internet or friends, and sometimes it's not always. Or experience, right? And then not knowing how to make sense of something, or like moving through life with information that isn't correct, and then just kind of like being stuck with that until hopefully someone comes along and is like, no.
Yeah.
That's not it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Totally. Wow, I can't wait to see you be an educator. You're going to be a really good one.
Thank you.
Well, you already are doing it, so you already are a great one, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I will have you come along and like be like a little co-facilitator a couple times, because you have knowledge that like could be spread in the classroom.
I also love like facilitating like workshops and classroom activities with kids. Like I've done that a lot, and I think that there's a lot of power with being able to like be up in front of a bunch of kids and be able to teach them something really important about like themselves and identity and relationships. And there's so much opportunity that teachers have that they don't always use for good. And there are a lot of wonderful teachers out there, obviously. Like if we wanted to talk about our favorite teachers who we had, we can spend an entire podcast thinking about that.
Literally.
And the good ones, and you are, I'm sure, so appreciative of like the good teachers who really like are creative and thoughtful, and it can make all the difference.
Most definitely, because like high school is such a transformative period. Like it really was for me, and I think like looking back on it, if I had these other concepts to explore, I feel like maybe I would have been a more secure adult right now.
Yeah,
young adult, but like there's still time for that.
Oh yeah, lots and lots of time. Okay, so this episode, as we already said, is all about queer sex ed, right? So what was your sex ed like? You talked a little bit about it and how, it was taught by your gym teacher. It was about internal anatomy. I'm assuming here that it didn't really talk about queer things.
Oh, no.
Yeah, hard no.
No. Like, yeah. That's unfathomable. Like, it's so funny because it definitely didn't. And I think it was kind of like that just straight assumption that that everybody is straight.
Right.
And I kind of I moved through life as a straight person for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just never thought anything of that. Like, hey, why isn't it inclusive? Or there are people in school that could benefit from this, because again, the assumption is everyone in school is straight, with the exception of a few LGBTQ youth that we knew, and that was very, very few, right?
And only a couple of them, if any, were out, right?
Exactly.
At the time. So it's hard to cater to folks who aren't out when the curriculum isn't inclusive in the first place.
Exactly. And I think as high schoolers, we already have these misconceptions of what queer sex looks like. And so then if you hear those things being spewed, you're not as likely to come out, right? And kind of be like, hey, no, chill, right?
Right. Or emphasizing the fact that HIV is a gay disease, and
that was how it was introduced to me.
For sure. A lot of people.
I remember my whole teacher she was really sweet. I like her, right? But I remember she put on a video talking about HIV. And this was the only STI that I recall discussing in school. Again, we did not talk about the act of sex. We at most just talked about how to put on a male condom and internal anatomy and a bit of external.
Yeah.
But I remember she put on a documentary on HIV, and the news clips or the news reports were just saying how, it spread from a flight attendant who was a gay man, and that had always cemented itself in my mind. I guess that was patient 1 or 0.
Right.
I don't even know if it is not accurate. And so for me now, I always have to like shake that off and be like, basically queer sex ed was non-existent.
Right.
And it's something that I think even before I started working at the door, I still didn't know what that could look like. Mm-hmm. And it's not until like the past like 3 years that like with the internet at my disposal and with like elders that I've learned things that are like helpful and necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. God, school sex ed is so bad, and it needs to be better.
And the memes about it are too accurate.
I know.
Like, you can't even...
It's horrible. I mean, Mean Girls really hit the nail on the head. Like, there hasn't been anything funnier or more poignant than that scene, and that happened 10 years ago. Do you know Mean Girls came out 10 years ago?
That's outrageous, because high school still feels like that.
Yeah, pretty wild,
high school
right?
culture.
Yeah.
You have sex and you die.
Exactly. You will get pregnant and die. Can we talk about your role at the door and is your title Peer Health Educator?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about what is the door? What do you do there? Do you love it? Tell us more.
Okay. So the door is essentially a youth nonprofit, right? For anybody who's 12 to 24, 23 kind of being the age that you age out slowly. But it's a space that has a whole bunch of different services, right? From college advising to mental health counseling, jobs and internships, benefit services and like applying, legal services, health center, like transitional housing, all these different things that like as a young person you are like struggling to get put in place even as an adult, right? And so it really takes this like holistic approach to helping young people becoming self-sufficient and like well-rounded and gaining the skills that they need to be successful and just be supported. And so for me, I work in the health center at the door that has it's kind of massive. It's like your first time there when you're being given a tour, you're just like, yeah, how am I gonna remember all of this stuff that's here? But it takes some time, but that just goes to show that like we're so dedicated to like helping in different facets of one's life. But in the health center as a peer health educator, kind of some of my in-house duties like involve like going to host weekly groups. And so one of those groups is Skittles, an LGBTQ group that I facilitate. That's one of our OG LGBTQ groups, was there before me. And so with that, like we have just kind of like open discussions for like community members who identifies LGBTQ about like different things, from like dating in the closet, if you're in the closet, or maybe dating someone in the closet, and what does that look like, and what are some reasons that we may not be out, right? Different things. And we also have movie night, so we'll watch movies like Tu Wong Fu or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and all these great like iconic films. And we also have groups like Gender Blender for gender nonconforming trans and gender expansive folk, and like TVB, Top First Bottom, for guys into guys. And like all of this revolves around education and having community in a space to maybe talk about things that like you don't want to talk about on the internet anymore, right? Or like you want to speak on in this space where you know there's going to be as little judgment, right?
Yes. There's something powerful about connection also.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know how you feel like being in New York City, but it's a little jarring for me being on the subway, and there can be like, I don't even know, maybe like 200 to 300 people that I see every day. Their face is completely in their phone. Their face is completely in their phone. They're not even looking up. You can pass by as many people as you want, but you're not really actually connecting with anybody.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me to recognize, being in such a big city, seemingly endless people, opportunities, relationships, etc., and you can't really make new friends unless like people are like there for a reason, you know?
Yeah. Like it's always I feel like it always has to be very intentional. Like it's never by accident in my experience as well.
Exactly.
I definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
So it's great because like there's a space where people can come and have these conversations. But also I go around the space and like also have groups that just revolve around like safer sex practices or drugs and alcohol. And so I'll go up in like the hangout space known as center space, and like I might bring my spinny wheel. I might be your Vanna White for the next 30 minutes, and I'm going to ask you about HIV and AIDS and quiz your knowledge. And if you know nothing before the start of this game, you will know something by the end.
Yeah.
That's kind of always my goal. At least leave with something, and knowing the 4 fluids for transmission. That's all I need you to know for right now.
Do you want to share them with our audience?
Yes. Part of me wishes I had the spinning wheel so I could quiz you guys. But the 4 fluids that transmit HIV are breast milk, semen, vaginal fluids, and blood. And also rectal fluid is like that 5th one that like kind of you want to throw in there.
Yeah.
But I just kind of learned that one. Did not know that.
You learn something new every day. Even honestly, as an educator.
Even as an educator. And that's what I love, because so many times I feel like the facilitation or the group is very collaborative, because although I'm coming with the information, young people also give me so much more as well. Like,
for sure.
It's a healthy exchange, I'd like to think.
Yeah.
And so outside of this space, me and fellow peer educators also do outreach. So that includes going to different high schools in all 5 boroughs or community organizations, and either tabling and doing outreach about the door and our mission and our services, or having a workshop, right, upon like whatever the staff member requested. So it could be on gender and sexuality, it could be on birth control, any of those topics.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you so much for all the work that you do there.
Thank you.
It's incredibly important. Yeah. So now getting into the meat of this interview, which is, what do schools in the U.S. need to include in their sex and health education curriculum in order to make it queer inclusive?
So I think one of the first things is inclusivity training, right? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like there's no way as an educator for you to come in and teach something but not have background on that thing, right? So if you're going to be teaching about like how sexuality is so expansive and there's different facets to it, right? It's important that you also receive that training yourself and support around that, so you know how to approach the conversation in the classroom, right? Mm-hmm. 'Cause a lot of times I think it's like teachers like would answer questions, but they just don't know what to say.
They don't have the answers.
They don't have the answer. And so it's very possible, like, if they shut it down incorrectly, it can make a student feel like, oh, well, sheesh. But, like, I guess talking about gender and talking about, like, sexuality is not something that I can do safely in this space.
Right.
And so, one, I think educators need training, right? Inclusivity training. 2, I think the curriculum needs to be, I guess, restructured, where we look at, because I used to think, God bless Planned Parenthood put me on, but I used to think that sexuality was just like who you were attracted to. But that's just one part.
Yeah.
It includes your relationships with folks, right? Your family, your friends. It includes your relationship with yourself, how you view your body image, all these different things. And so I think really establishing a concrete understanding and like, this is sexuality, it is expansive, it is all these different things, right? So that we can understand that. And then from there, just like discussing how, look, genitalia does not equal gender.
Right.
That is a big one, because then you start off the conversation letting people know, right? We're going to talk about people that have this anatomy, that have penises, and people that have vulvas, right? But your anatomy does not determine what gender you are.
Yes.
So that way, when we go into the discussion, people understand that, okay, I'm not saying this is how all women have sex, because not all women have the same parts. And so I feel like if that is established and the more that's repeated, like, the seed is planted, right?
Yeah.
Even if someone is very hesitant to accept that knowledge, right? The seed is planted, and from there, you've given the message, and whatever happens after that, like, you just know that you've you've done your part.
Totally. And that's like leading by example, right? Like if your teachers are like inclusive and are using the right language and are making sure that like LGBTQ people are feeling included in the conversation, then students are going to feel that, and they're going to feel more comfortable with their own bodies. They're going to feel more comfortable with their own questioning of their own identities. And especially middle school and high school students, like they don't know, and that's okay. And we need to tell them that like part of this is like, you know, I'm however old the teacher is, they're still figuring out their identity. Every day is different, and they're on their own journey and their own path. And like making sure that kids know that like it's okay if they don't have the answers.
Exactly. It's a lifelong process. And I think there's a lot of pressure to have that figured out at a certain point.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you have time. Like, life is supposed to be a journey to be understood. You don't have to rush that.
Totally. Okay, let's see what else we got. So, as a queer person, as a queer young person, let's be specific here, where do you get your sex ed if not from school?
I get it from very trusted sources on the internet. So a lot of it is like me typing into YouTube, like how to have safe queer sex.
Yeah.
Or like
YouTube's a good one.
It is such a good one. Like Dr. Doe, aka Sexplanations.
Okay.
My work wife had put me on, and it's just so helpful because she talks about all these great things. And so that's just one example of a resource. Also like Instagram and like friends, like when I'm feeling comfortable and like not being awkward about it, but like really, really just like Instagram as well, because there'll be like people that maybe a kink blog that a friend will follow, and then from there I'll follow that and then look in deeper into the people involved and like absorb their knowledge that they give on different forums and whatnot.
Yeah, like the cool thing about the internet nowadays is people link to other people.
Yes.
So it's not just like individual sites and profiles anymore. It's like a tree of information. And like that's what's so cool about especially the queer community and learning about queer sex is like you can literally hashtag like queer sex on Twitter and on Instagram, and there are so many different things and people and events and ideas that like can pop up.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love about it. Like even like when it comes to ideas around sex, like if I'm not on the internet, I might be like again talking to a friend and I don't know, it's just I think I'm still like a little iffy about like asking people information about sex unless it's like an elder.
Right.
So like I also like have older LGBTQ folk that like I trust, and I'm like, hey, like I had a question, like me and a friend were talking about X, Y, and Z, and we were wondering if that's actually true or if there are other ways to do it.
Yes.
And because they're older, because they have experience, because they're also in community health and like public health, they have better answers than sometimes we do.
Totally.
So.
Yeah. I love that. And especially like I feel like elders in the queer community have their own kind of like space and like spot on the stage to like really do teaching. That's at least like what I've heard from my queer friends, especially like in the drag community or, you know, in certain like niche like parts of the queer community.
Oh, yeah.
Where I think that's like really beautiful and really cool.
I agree.
Amazing. So what do you think older people, speaking of elders, but older people who aren't helpful or are kind of don't have like the right, quote unquote, the right idea about queer people, maybe they're like bigoted, or maybe they just don't have the information, or have never met a queer person, or have never even like seen any movies or TV shows with queer people or read any books with queer people, you know, like pretty misinformed, miseducated folks who I find typically who are speaking about these things to be older and to be non-queer people. In my experience, they're probably young people.
Right.
There definitely are, because this is America and we understand who is president currently. But, you know, I guess my question is, What do older people not understand about young queer identifying people that you would like to teach them?
Right. There's so much. So much.
What's like top on your list?
Top on my list, I think, is just a sense of humanity. Because really, if you... I don't want... how do I word this? Okay. So I think it's important to keep in mind that you are a human being and I am a human being, and there are just some things that I think are essential, like respect and understanding, right? Even if we live our lives in different ways, identify in different ways, it doesn't take away that like all humans are in need of sympathy and compassion and just respect. I really think is what it boils down to. For older people, what I would tell them is that, look, there was a status quo, right? There's a binary enforced, and our generation is realizing and understanding that it's not healthy and it's not helpful. And we're choosing not to follow with that, right? And that's okay. And I think a lot of times when you deviate from the often taken path, people get scared because they're like, you're being defiant and you're living this crazy lifestyle. And it's like, there's no correct way to live, right? There's no correct way to go about getting an education. There's no correct way to finding your identity. There's no correct way to like, it's just like, it's limiting, and people, our generation, I think we're tired of being limited.
Yes.
And so, I don't know. I feel like I'm like all over the place, but I think that's just remember that we're human beings, and you know, we just wanted to be happy. I think we just want to be free. We want to feel free, like we can be our most authentic, genuine self.
You are such a wise soul. Has anyone told you this?
What?
Yeah. Have people told you that?
I've gotten that sentiment, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's so great. I feel so like calm. It's really nice.
Yo, I'm so convinced in another life I was just like a cat. I tell people
I love that.
I was just a cat.
I also am definitely a cat out of the cat dog situation. Oh, so I really love other cat people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why this works.
This is why this is great. Okay. A more fun question.
Okay.
We have 2 questions left.
Gotcha.
Who are your queer icons at the moment and why? Like, who do you look up to?
Oh my God. I was just looking at her Instagram on the train here.
Please. Who?
Their name is Erica Hart.
Oh my gosh, yes. We were trying to get Erica Hart on this podcast, but they didn't respond, so that's okay. They're very busy and famous. Of course,
yeah. Your favorite, like, plant person, non-binary femme. I love them so much because, oh my God. They're not even here and I'm fangirling.
Just thinking about them.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. I love Erica so much because they not only talk about queerness and like acceptance, but also how that intersectionality, they look at race and gender and sexuality and have those both in the conversation because you cannot talk about one without the other. And I think for me, Erica, obviously everyone is human and on their own path and nobody is like has the key, as DJ Khaled says, but like for me, with where Erica is at and what I see, they personify freedom and just comfort, right? Being comfortable in one's skin and not allowing other people to dictate who you are. So for instance, they have a post where they were discussing how they did an interview for, I think, a sexual health magazine, and they were like kind of reading back over the interview.
Oh, I saw this, yeah.
And the person kind of changed their title from sex educator to sex positive influencer and like use the wrong pronouns.
Right.
And I just thought that was crazy because they mentioned how like as a Black sexual health educator, how sometimes the work you do is not seen in the same light as that of maybe a white sexual health educator, and how I I don't know, that just really kind of got to me, in the sense that my mom always used to say, and I would be so defiant against it. She would say, oh, Fatima, in this world, you have to work like 5 times harder. And I was like, no, because my work is just as valid as everyone else's, and I shouldn't have to work hard to prove myself, but not really understanding what she meant at the time by that. And Erica just kind of brought that to light more. And I love the fact that they don't hold their tongue. And I think I'm always very scared.
Yeah.
To say out how I feel, because I always want to be either politically correct or agreeable to all, and like I'm trying to get into a space where I can understand that like my truth doesn't have to be agreeable. It is my truth, right? And it is what it is.
Yeah. Being likable is overrated, I think.
It's so tiring.
Yeah. And it's really hard to like keep it up, really make sure you're saying the right thing all the time, and you're making sure everyone, like, obviously the whole point is to like make sure that everyone is respected. That's like the baseline importance, but also like having your own opinions and like saying like fuck you to something you really don't like should happen.
Exactly. And I think that's why, oh my God, I love Erica.
Yes.
I think that's why for me, Erica Hart and Audre Lorde will forever be in my canon of like, just, I don't know, what do I want to call this canon of folks? My canon of like badass motherfuckers that like I want to like learn from. Because Audre Lorde, I can say the same for, right? Looking at intersectionality and not holding one's tongue and doing it in such an eloquent but like fuck you kind of way. I just feel like anytime I'm drained or like I'm tired, I will go back and like I'll read Audre Lorde's work, or I might be like, you know what, we need to read some like Alice Walker or some bell hooks or something to like restore me, and so I gotta give it to Audre and Erica.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Again, very old and wise soul you have, and it's very touching the way you like talk about them and like how you look up to them. Aww. I think it's beautiful. So the last question that I have for you is, how can allies, friends, and family of queer youth support them, especially in this political climate? Right.
This one is a question I think I struggle with, because I don't even know how to ask for what I need. And sometimes I struggle with identifying what it is that I need. But I think baseline, what would be helpful is like a white flag, right? Letting me know that I'm here for you. I may not understand, but I'm open and willing to learn, right? And if there's anything you want to talk about and if you need support, I can be that for you. And I think that's the first step, because if you don't know that you have a person to go to, or if you don't know if that person's in your corner, you're not going to go to them.
Right.
But until that's been established, then you know, okay, there's a resource I need. And I think just checking in with that person, being like, what are your needs? Is like the first thing, because everyone's needs are going to be different. And your needs will change over time, right? What might have been helpful this month might not be as helpful 2 months from now.
Totally. Just the constant kind of check-in.
Yeah. And that will indicate to someone that like, okay, there's concern and there's care and compassion, right? You don't have to understand everything. And I think that is one thing that sometimes scares people off, is like, I don't know enough like to be there. That's a gay issue and I'm not gay, so I can't be a person for you. But it's like, no, you just need to listen. Sometimes that's all people need.
Self-care is super important to us here at Sex Ed with DB. Luckily, we found a partner who cares about it just as much as we do. Say hey to Sweet Vibrations. Sweet Vibrations is an adult boutique out of sunny San Diego that encourages young people to educate themselves about sexual wellness and improve overall health. Everyone deserves their O, and Sweet Vibrations is committed to helping you find yours. All 4 of their buzzing beauties are under $50, so you don't have to break the bank. Go to www.sweetvibes.toys to buy yours today. Buzz, buzz. Is that a vibrator I hear? Nope, that's Millie. And if you've ever had painful intercourse, then this vaginal dilator may be just what you're looking for. Millie is an easy-to-use, 100% BPA-free silicone dilator with optional, gentle vibration and user-controlled in-vagina expansion. Millie enables you to gradually increase size without having to deal with the sometimes awkward and painful stages in between dilator sizes. Millie has a range of 14 to 40 millimeters and expands 1 millimeter at a time. That's like having 26 standalone dilators. And in the spirit of Marie Kondo, no one needs that many dilators. Learn more about Millie at milliemedical.com. Our creator, producer, and host is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our assistant producer is Kathy Cohen. Our graphic illustrator is Alana Rance. Our sound engineer is Oliver Devone. Our fundraising co-coordinator is Jamie Cooper. And our other fundraising co-coordinator / content assistant is Callie Cochran. Our music is by Ben Sound and Hook Sounds. Thank you so much to our featured voices, sponsors, and our listeners. Tune in next time.